So having done my service as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, having recovered from my medical issues, my hepatitis E, ready to be back in the game, Assistant Secretary Winston Lord went all out to get me an appointment as an ambassador. I'm in my early 50s. I've had an unusual career, but I've worked in Southeast Asia and had experience not only in Indochina, but in the Philippines, and the ambassadorship in Manila, in the Philippines, was coming open in 1996. And it was one that was going to be filled by a career officer. And so when that happens, various candidates in the State Department start vying for it. They try to find senior people who are supporting them and pushing it all up and trying to bring as much influence as you can. So the decision is made by the Deputy Secretary of State in something called the D Committee, letter D, which stood for Deputy Secretary of State. So there were a couple of other officers, very strong candidates, and me vying for this. But Winston Lord, the former ambassador to China, who I knew from knowing that Willie Mays was on deck when Bobby Thompson hit his home run in 1951, and then we had worked together so carefully for several years on Vietnam, Cambodia, the election, putting everything in place. And Winston just went all out and succeeded in getting me approved to be the State Department recommended candidate to run the largest American embassy in the world. I'd be going back to Manila, where Corazon Aquino had been president. Now Eddie Ramos would be president. Democracy was flourishing. I'd come back there and run this huge American embassy, supportive of democracy, be a wonderful setting for my family, one great school for my wife. And so my name had to go to the White House. Really, the approvals over there would be pro forma. There was no political appointee. The decision had already been made between the White House and state. Philippines belongs to state, can go to a career officer. It's a tough assignment. So we need to have a good career person there. It would be me. And my name, all the paperwork was done. I filled everything out. Went up to the Deputy Secretary of State, goes to him, he signs it, throws it in his outbox, and then his phone rings. And it's a call from the U.S. ambassador in Manila, John Negroponte, good friend, officer I respect greatly, didn't know anything about my name being in, saying that his plans have changed. Can he remain for another 6 months or a year in the Philippines in his position? And the deputy secretary, his name was Strobe Talbot, another good guy who I knew well, said, well, your timing was good. I've just signed the papers for your successor, but I'll pull them back and you can stay. And suddenly, all of the fulfillment of my career, almost 3 decades long, building towards this job, running the biggest American embassy in the world, one with a myriad of problems, and evaporated before my eyes. Winston Lord called me in to tell me this. I couldn't believe it. I was so incredibly crestfallen. And he said, the only other embassy left is Cambodia. You're, of course, very qualified for that. It's yours if you want it. All I have. I wasn't going to be Deputy Assistant Secretary anymore. I wouldn't be earning any plaudits, any credit. Who knew what embassies might come up a year later? Would Winston Lord be there? Would he feel an obligation to me if I passed this up? It was the bird in the hand. I thought hard. It would be very difficult, but it was a big challenge. I had built a lot in Cambodia. Seemed like the action was over, and so I said, yes, please, put my name in. I was put forward to be ambassador for Cambodia. End up being hung up for 6 months because Senator Jesse Helm refused to approve any ambassadors going to post because he had some dispute with the State Department about funding for the UN. And he said, I'm just not going to confirm ambassadors. So it was well into 1996 before I was finally confirmed by the Senate. After a hearing, which John McCain came to introduce me, incredibly touching memory, having Senator McCain, with whom I had worked on POWMIA, show up, recommend me to the committee. And then I'm approved by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, approved by the Senate. And in mid-March 1996, I would get on the plane alone and go to Phnom Penh and present my credentials and start the process of being ambassador, and see then I'd be able to arrange for my family to come and perhaps schooling for my children in Bangkok. It'd be a difficult process and an assignment as ambassador fraught with a lot of very difficult issues.